Um, I do not burn with the sun, but I evolve. I get better. And my brown skin is beautiful. I have learned to love my brown skin. It has taken me years to realize what was happening and to undo the sun avoidance stance that many of us non-Black Latinx are told to do. Mi mami tells me to get out of the sun. Mi mami tells me to put on sunblock. And I understand what she's doing. I understand what she's been taught, but I refuse to let the color of my skin and my gender make me hide under ridiculous gorros and run away from the sun like it's some awful thing. I refuse to incomodarme and being complicit in anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity. Instead, I constantly speak up when I hear all this casual, everyday colorism happening. You have to learn to detect it. You have to activate that lens because it's happening so much. You don't even see it till somebody says it's happening, y'all. I didn't see it for years until I learned the term colorism. And I was like, oh my God. And I also continue to go to the beach. I put on sunblock because I want to protect this brown skin that I was blessed with. And I watch magic happen. So we're going to step into like tougher territory right now, but I'm going to introduce this with the author first. So I want to talk about toxic masculinity and sexism within colonized communities as generational trauma. And to fully do that, I think, okay, so how I told y'all that this book is like really easy to read and it's different than most academic books. Okay, this book is not easy to read. Like I've had to read it while standing up because I will forget what I'm reading. It's so dense, it's so heavy, but it's so good. Dr. Cynthia Lo, it's called Bananas, Beaches, and Bases. And it's the first book that gave me my life back in a lot of ways. It was the first book that made sense to a lot of the chaos I grew up in. I grew up in a really traditional household, in a household where men are strong, men don't cry, men provide, and women stay home, women cook, women are emotional, too emotional, hysterica sometimes. And that's kind of how the gender norms were kind of kept at bay. And I didn't understand what was happening to my life for forever. And then I read this book. So Cynthia Lo is a political scientist, and she makes the argument through a lot of research that gender roles become reinforced in colonized communities and communities that experience chaos. Hey, guess what? Latin America has experienced chaos in our parents' lifetime. So the fact that a lot of us have a similar traumatic stories in relationship to these gender norms has a lot to do with all the conflict that our parents have experienced or may have experienced in our countries. And because what happens when people are at war? What happened? Like the revolution that happened in Nicaragua. It had been happening for years, but my parents lived it in the 70s specifically. And leaving the house was dangerous. My dad had to cross multiple barrios that were on different sides of the revolution. And he says stories like, just to visit my mom, he had to cross all these barrios, and there would be like contras in one area, sandinistas in another area. So those were our two parties, oppositional parties that were fighting each other at the time. And he would be in a contra territory, and they would sing like el que no es contra, el que no brinca es contra, el que no brinca es contra, and shoot at the floor at people just walking to see like my dad, his girlfriend. And so women were encouraged to stay home. The gender norms got reinforced, and men were expected to do the things that had to be outside of the house because it was dangerous. And when I understood that, I was like, okay, like it isn't just evil existing for the sake of evil. There's a term, there's research behind it, like it makes sense. But none of that takes away from the experiences that I had growing up. I was encouraged to get married. I was encouraged to really, really young. I was encouraged to stay at home, not have a career. Having a career was seen as really beneath my gender almost. Although men were the ones that had career and they were placed above. So it was a really weird selling point that they made with that. But I wrote this piece because I needed to just name the thing that I've always experienced in my life. And sometimes it's hard to directly name the culprits or the people to blame, but it's easier to name the thing that's been haunting you your whole life. So I'm going to read to y'all this this kind of letter I wrote to toxic masculinity as I experienced it. But I'm going to read this quote before we start because I think it's important. The gut instinct is to not, de eso no se habla. There are things we keep in the family, or at least he didn't hit you. There's that language around a lot of emotional abuse stuff. So I'm going to start with this bell hooks quote that says, we tell fathers we love them when we are terrified to share our true perceptions of them. Our fear that if we disagree, we will be cast out, excommunicated. In this way, we all collude with patriarchal culture to make men feel like they can have it all, that they can embrace patriarchal culture and still hold their loved ones near. So I have a whole chapter on toxic masculinity as generational trauma and the ways that, again, I experienced it. And I start that chapter calling toxic masculinity, kind of referring to toxic masculinity as the monster under my bed. So that's how you're going to see it. I saw you coming a mile away. There were parts of you that I wanted to embrace because those parts of you reminded me of him. Those parts reminded me of mi papi. But because of him, I knew you. I didn't need to see you to know you because my heart was broken by you a long time ago. I know how to spot you across the room, across the phone screen on my dating apps. And not only can I spot you, but I know our ending before we even began. We were doomed because you could not love, because you weren't taught how to love. You take up space. Your energy is vibrant, infectious, so as to make others forget to analyze themselves. People get consumed into you, by you, and forget who they are. That type of energy is felt. That much energy is visible. You take up too much space that people are left without room to breathe. I saw mi mami lose herself in this energy. As a kid, I saw her struggling to find herself, find her way back to herself. I saw her struggling to figure out how this happened to her, struggling to blame herself because that's what we are taught to do. I saw her struggling to protect you when your daughters began to see through the charade. You take up so much space that you hurt others around you. You care about your looks entirely too much. You wear all the right clothes, all the right jewelry, hair always done, shoes always polished. You make people feel lucky to be around you, to be associated with you. But it's all part of the illusion Inside you hold darkness and anger, covered up by pristine ironed clothing mi mami spent all day ironing, and nice watches. You create the illusion to distract people from what is within you. You are a master of disguise. You drive like you have something to prove. Your vehicle has become an extension of you and your manhood, and you drive like someone's always watching, like someone's always judging. Like every vehicular decision is going to reflect on you and your masculinity. No matter what is happening, your car needs to represent you. You drive like the world owes you something, like you're always late, like you do not understand how traffic works, like the rules weren't meant for you. Appearances are a total package for you, and that is of utmost importance. You speak confidently about everything you know, and even everything you don't know. And when someone proves to have more knowledge than you, you lose interest. You get quiet. You stop engaging. If someone you know attempts to take up more space than you, that is grounds for terminating that relationship, or rather ridiculing them publicly. If that person happens to be your oldest daughter, then so be it. She should have known better. You are proud. Your reputation is more important to you than your actions. You present a face in public that is different than who you are in private. You will blame everyone else around you for doing things you did to save face. If that means blaming mi mami for thoughts she never had, things she never said, things she never did, then so be it. How you look to the few men you look up to is currency to you. You hate yourself so much that you pretend to love yourself. And then eventually you self-sabotage. I saw you coming a mile away, and I resent that my instinct was to run straight into your arms. So instead, I ran as far away from you as I could. So that's really heavy. So I think I'm going to do this one because I did a talk earlier today and I skipped this one and went to the last one for the sake of time, and I regretted that instantly. So I'm going to do this piece and then we're going to jump into a Q&A. But attaching our worth to white institutions is trauma. And what are white institutions? They're all of them. If at its foundation, it had white men in leadership in its inception, it most likely is a white institution. And what is that? Academia, corporate America. I mean, it's everything. And unfortunately, we have been socialized that is the only way that is worthy, that is the only direction we should be headed towards. That's all our aspirations should be there. We define success by proximity to all of those institutions of power. And we're rewarded for that behavior. But unfortunately, at least for me, I got the degrees, I got the accolades, and I got the invitation to the White House. And I thought, soy la última Coca-Cola del mundo. I am la mera mera. Like no one can touch me. And I brought that energy home. My academic space that gave me this confidence, this ill-placed confidence, was very competitive. The goal was to be the smartest person in the room, to sound like the smartest person in the room, to bolster your arguments with as many citations you could regurgitate in the middle of a heated debate. And I didn't know how to turn that off. So I would go home and turn everything into these heated debates. Like they'd be watching Univision and they'd be like Sábado Gigante commercial. And I'd be like, y por eso el machismo vive en esta casa. Ustedes sigue. I would just like do too much because I had attached my worth to my academic space. because I had believed the lie that I was better when I was closer to that. And I mirrored that behavior and I acted like people who couldn't argue back were beneath me. It is a terrible practice. I don't recommend it. I want y'all to fall in that trap. But again, like colorism, it's one of those things that if somebody doesn't tell you, you don't snap out of it. At least I didn't. And so I'm going to recommend this book. Everybody loves to say decolonize, 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 but nobody explains what decolonizing means. So this is one of my favorite books. It's called Coloniality. And so what people are saying when they decolonize, when they say decolonize, is colonialism and all these institutions came under these white empires, and we have built entire nation states under these white empires. And what that means is to attempt to decolonize our colonizers is to attempt to find dignity for ourselves underneath the rubble of years and years and decades of not having a sense of worth. And when we do get the sense of worth, it's only in relationship to colonial institutions, white institutions. So this is one of my favorite books. It is dense. Probably more dense than this one, if I'm being honest, y'all. It is hard. It is not pretty. But this one's written by Walter Mignolio, co-written. And it is one of the better ones. So I do recommend it. But I wrote this piece because the ways that it manifested itself, the ways that my arrogance, because of my white institutions, manifested itself, was that I started mistreat my parents. So I wrote this piece to kind of snap me out of it. And it happened because something my mommy said to me. So I'm going to read you all this and we're going to jump into the Q&A. I am not better than mi mami. That's what it's titled. Mi mami is not terca. Nor is she ignorant, nor is she someone that I need to decolonize. I have a mommy who loves me, despite how much she will try to indoctrinate me into becoming una mujer virtuosa, is her favorite line. Whenever I was going in college, I could like make dean's list, get nominated to be president of a club on campus, be juggling a million things and kicking ass, but it would be like crickets in my house. But I washed like a dish and my mom would walk by, like she would just hear it from upstairs and walk by and be like, sos una mujer virtuosa, which rubbed me the wrong way growing up, y'all. But where I have been and where I am going is entirely different than what she imagined for me. It is. And when I was younger, I resisted everything she wanted for me. And I argued and I screamed to the top of my lungs. I felt like she was suffocating me. And yet, I have been able to do things that no one in my family has ever dreamt of doing. And it got to my head. And so one day, it was spring break, I was home and I go into the kitchen. My mom has like a little table she sits in every morning. She drinks her pan con mantequilla and her café every morning. So I walk in and she's like, sentate, aquí, sentate. And I was like, because I don't know about y'all, but my parents love to have meetings or they like unload on you all the, like they've discovered your secret boyfriend, your car, your traffic citation that you were hiding and trying to like pay on your own just to not get in trouble. Like they've discovered the thing you were hiding. And that's when meetings come. And so this was a meeting and I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Did I leave a vibrator out? Like, did they find out about this guy? Everything in my mind ran. Like I just had a million thoughts. And she just looked at me straight in the eyes and she said, yo no soy estúpida. And you need to stop treating me like I am dumb. And I was shook. I was like, my newly acquired book smarts cannot ever mean that I get to forget that my mommy is where she is today because she's a survivor. That's decoloniality. mi mami received the education that she was given access to, if we're all being honest. She had aspirations. She wanted to be a reporter when she was younger. She talks about this often. It's like when there's a hurricane in Miami, my mom will get everybody into her Kia Sorrento and we'll go to the El Ojo. We've been floating in the car before because she needed to be as close to the storm as possible. I mean, it's dangerous. This lady is like willing to do it all with her children in the back to get the shot. So she would have been a great reporter, y'all. She was made for a job like that. But she couldn't become that person because of social expectations. For however strict my household was, her household was stricter. And lack of money. And so she decided to love the person that she did become, which is mi mami. So the minute that my education begins to make me look down at her, I have failed her and myself. And not only that, but my education has failed to teach me to treat people like people. This system has failed to teach me that my worth isn't tied to these institutions. My worth is tied to how I treat others. And yes, mi mami disagrees with who I have become today. She thinks it's wild that I have a job. She prefers I was married and panzona with like my seventh kid, if she could help it. That is her ideal Priscilla narrative. And she is genuinely terrified that I don't have kids yet. She says, like, ¿quién te va a cuidar cuando estés viejita? But mi mami also has a glow in her eyes when she hears about the things that I get to talk to everybody about, like y'all. And when my dad has treated her poorly, she's the first to call my sister, not me, my sister, and be like, si Priscila estuviera aquí, nunca me hubiera hablado así él. So she sees something in me. She knows I'm building a new reality. I'm not better than mi mami, but I've had opportunities at my fingertips that she could never have dreamt of. Never. And I cannot forget that it is mi mami who I have to thank for all of my possibilities. When I say I am mi mami's revolution, that in my ideal world, she's in these spaces listening and understanding everything. I mean it. I mean, all the work that I do is for people like her. All the work that I aspire to do is for people like her. Everything I do for her. And I do it for us. Thank you for coming to the chat. I think I'm going to pass it over. I went over my time a little bit, but we're going to have a Q&A.
Prisca, thank you so much for, wow, it's a lot to process, but I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable with our community about your own experience and your family's experience. We do have a question. We have a few questions. Let me pull it up. So a question is, how do you cope with anti-Blackness coming from your own Latinx family, specifically your closest family, such as your parents? And what reactions do you have with them, or what do you tell them?
I am very vocal now that I have all the tools that I need. And I'm very vocal. I speak up. I don't let any of it slide, even when I feel like I just needed a good day. I refuse. What I do now, if it's, because sometimes we don't have the energy to fully show up like that with our family. It's exhausting to do that. So I've created boundaries. So I won't go if I'm tired. I won't go if I don't have the capacity to have those conversations. But if I'm there, I'm going to engage fully because I won't be complicit in those narratives anymore. But I think it requires us to be okay with being uncomfortable for years.
Thank you, Prisca. You speak a lot about that generational trauma. So you speak about what your mom went through, what your dad has gone through. What was it like for you to learn about that trauma, and how did you navigate those spaces with your parents?
It rocked my world, y'all. I had lived in a bubble for so long And I had accepted that things just were the way that they were for so long that it rocked my world. I mean, I was the person that wasn't allowed to leave the house until I got married. When I said traditional Latino family, I meant it in like every word. And I did. I got married to leave my parents' house because I thought that's what you do, and you're supposed to do what you're told. Like the resistance wasn't even part of my vocabulary. And so when I learned everything, I got divorced, y'all. I started to hoe it up because I wanted to discover what I liked sexually. I had my own sexual liberation. I created really strict boundaries with my brother and my dad. They don't have access to me whenever they want, because I know what that does to my soul now. I'm learning to have better boundaries with my mom, but it's literally, it rocked my world, and it's rocked their world in a lot of ways. My mom has seen me own my voice, own my body, own my decisions, so my dad always wanted her to have a short pixie cut because he said long hair was too sexy for women. And if you meet my mom today, her hair is like almost to her butt. And again, with heels, he would say that heels were too sexy. She has more heels than I do at this point. So it's been hard. I have become unrecognizable in some ways to my parents, but it's been very gratifying I have a more substantive relationship with my sister. My mom has started to move through the world differently. Like, she doesn't iron my dad's clothes anymore. She has a lot of rules. She cooks what she wants to eat. She no longer waits for him to tell him what he wants to eat and then her buy everything like she used to. Like, she's like adapted a lot of her life to like feel happy with the life that she's living. So it's been great, but it's been really hard. And I talk about this in my book. Like, it's this journey of like learning all these things is hard, and it might end friendships for you. It might end relationships for you. I mean, I got divorced. Trust me, it'll end things immediately at first, but you'll gain so much more.
Thank you, Prisca. And then the last question before we close our event. You did mention your book, and people have questions, obviously, about where they can find more of your talks or just learn more about your book. So maybe you can speak a little bit about what inspired you to write your book and what it's about.
Yeah, you can find me anywhere on social media under Latina Rebels, at Latina Rebels everywhere, or at Prisca Dorcas. I actually have a book. It's not mine. I'm supposed to sign it for someone. But this is my book. It's for brown girls with sharp edges and tender hearts. I wanted to write the book that I needed growing up, so I wrote it all down for y'all. I have over 200 of these citations in the back. I was very exhaustive with my research. I really wanted, for those of people who felt called in for certain chapters and certain topics, I wanted them to go to the back and just find a plethora of other books to take you on different journeys, and to continue to grow. But I wanted to write the kind of book that I needed and I didn't have for years.
Awesome. Thank you, Prisca. And in terms of Latina Rebels, can you kind of explain for people who don't know what your Instagram Latina Rebels is about?
Yeah, Latina Rebels is in the same vein as this book. It's providing an alternative voice that I wish I would have had more of. And when I started Latina Rebels, I started in 2013, Cinco de Mayo 2013, and there weren't pages like this. Like, being progressive, it didn't exist in the ways that it exists on Instagram and TikTok. Like, there's educational videos on TikTok about everything. It was like a desert landscape of information when I started LR. So it was just to provide more conversation. Like, I wanted people to think differently, to push whatever expectations that had to make people uncomfortable. I just wanted us to have different conversations, and it's still going around, and it resulted in my career. So I'm really thankful for it.
And we are thankful for you, Prisca. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your story, your background, your family's history. I know it's not easy to delve into the dark spaces that sometimes our Latinx community occupies, but we appreciate you being so open with us and taking time out of your very busy schedule. But congratulations on your book, and we really hope to have you for a future event.
Yes, thank you for having me, everyone. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you, Prisca.
Bye.